Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 13th of September 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com. That's mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Counter-Strike Go. Little else really needs to be said about that, to be honest. First email comes in here. This is a quick one. I just want to put this out here as more of a PSA than anything else. Comes from an anonymous viewer that says, "Hello there, when Borderlands 2 became available for pre-order, they promised the customers that they'll receive the Necromancer class," that's Mechromancer, by the way, "as a special bonus. But what they left out was that they wouldn't be releasing it till late October. My question to you is, do you think they did this so more people would pre-order the game, thinking that they will get to play an exclusive class when the game is released, or just because they need to tweak the Necro a bit more?" It's because it's not done yet. And they didn't hide this. They made it blindingly obvious. Even when they first announced the Mechromancer class and all the pre-orders, they were very clear that it wasn't day one DLC because it wasn't done yet. When they announced it, they hadn't even started. They'd only got actual concept art. They hadn't got anything in the game. It says so on the Steam page. Quote, "New character class. Receive a new download of the all-new Mechromancer character class as soon as she's available." As soon as she is available. That's kind of important. Just bear that in mind. So this is a hoo-ha over nothing, and I've got to say, I'm actually rather happy they're doing this. Great, it's a pre-order bonus that you're getting later on, and doesn't take away from development time of the actual game. The game is done. Now they're working on it, and the game is sitting in stores right now. Obviously it can't be sold yet, but it is in the storeroom, ready to go. Game is ready. Cool, great, fantastic. So now they're working on other content, and of course they're working on this. If this was going to be a case of, hey, we're going to make 5 classes and we're going to cut one of them out and you've got to either pre-order or pay $10 for it on day one, then you could be angry. In this case, though, no, absolutely not. This is a totally fair way of doing things, and quite frankly, it's more than equitable. This email comes in from David that says, "Recently I told a friend about PlanetSide 2, about how I can't wait to get into the beta for it and tell them to check out the trailer. He watched the trailer and said it ripped off games such as Crysis 2, Halo Reach, and others, and I asked him how, and he said the following: the guys have the suits from Crysis, and the humans are Marines from Halo, only on steroids, and the end of the trailer copied the Halo trailer. I proceeded to tell him about how games copy each other, such as every shooter after Doom's release was a Doom clone, and StarCraft also derives some of its models from 40k. He said that's not important. I also told him that Halo's Forge mode is basically a cheap map editor, which have been used way back for the RTS genre. But the dumbest thing is, he said PlanetSide 2 has bad graphics compared to Halo 4. Oh, just stop. Your friend's an idiot. Sorry. I mean, what is this, a discussion between teenagers? Right, okay, I get it, fine. But this is just idiotic. We get these kind of questions all the time, and it actually bothers me a little bit. It's like, help settle our dispute between two 12-year-olds or whatever. Okay, great, you're having a discussion, you have the right to do that, but don't bring me into it. I mean, it's flat out retarded. Here's the thing we do with people like that. We don't argue with them because it's a waste of time. I mean, anyone that seriously believes that Halo 4 looks better than PlanetSide 2 is actually blind, willfully or otherwise. There's no real question about that. PlanetSide 2 blows Halo 4 out of the water. You would have to be blind not to see that. This is an objective fact. This is not about art style. This is not about a discussion where you say, well, I think this game looks better than this game because there's a deliberate aesthetic choice that's been used here. It's like suggesting, well, Borderlands looks better than Halo. That's a really stupid statement because they both look good in different ways. Same thing as saying Borderlands looks better than PlanetSide. Like, well, on a technical level, PlanetSide 2 is more advanced in terms of the effects that it can put there, the texture quality, things like that. But Borderlands looks different. It's a different art style. You can't directly compare the two. You can say that they prefer one over the other, but you can never say that one's better than the other, just as you can't say that metal is better than hip-hop, or hip-hop is better than pop, or pop's better than trance, or whatever. You can't say those things, because while you can make objective remarks about it and say, well, metal requires you to actually be able to play an instrument, it requires more talent, the writing is more in-depth, it doesn't matter, because people still say, well, I prefer rap, I just like the sound of it. And it's the same way as saying, I like the look of it. The whole rip-off thing is just nonsense. There's no point in even arguing with somebody like that. Hey, come on, rips off Crysis 2, Halo Reach, God, is he 8 years old? You want to talk about guys in powered armor, then you want to be talking about 40k to start with, which predates all of that stuff, and then prior to that, you want to be talking about things like Starship Troopers, the original novel. There is no point in arguing with people that are that stupid. They are beyond help, it just gives you a headache. At the end of the day, what does it matter? Oh no, okay, so he's gonna go play Halo 4, not PlanetSide 2. Wow, that's truly a loss to the PlanetSide 2 player base. Yeah, you know what, I think PlanetSide 2 can do without people like that. Just let people like what they like. And if they have ignorant thoughts about things, think about just, is it actually important to really get this guy to see the light, as it were? He likes different video games, and he's got some weird ideas about where certain themes come from. But it's, at the end of the day, still video games. It's still a hobby that doesn't really matter all that much in the grand scheme of things. You don't need to expend your effort talking to someone like that and trying to argue with him. It's like, oh, I think this. Well, okay, cool. So he won't play PlanetSide. All right, just say, okay, you think that, that's fine. Can't be asked arguing with you. It's not worth the effort. This one comes in from Oscar that says, today a proposition from a Swedish inquiry was released, suggesting that parents would not automatically have to pay for purchases done by their children in mobile apps. This is to combat predatory business aimed at children, such as the infamous Smurf Village. These sort of practices have led to children accidentally buying virtual items for over €1,000, with the children not even realizing what they did. Do you think it's a good initiative? Would it actually have any effect? Or is it just a way for unresponsible parents to get away from paying for not keeping control over what their kids do with their phones? Little bit of column A, little bit of column B. Every now and again, you find the answer lies somewhere in the middle, and in this case, that is certainly true. So, I do not approve of the predatory business practices of things like Smurf Village. Yes, it is obviously aimed at kids, although I might add it's not actually played exclusively by children. An awful lot of adults play these stupid games, and I say stupid games because they're barely even games. Having tried some of them like Farmville and of course Tiny Tower, I was looking at them like, this isn't a game, there's no decision making going on here. There's no challenges, there's no problems to solve. It's just a case of, oh, I have earned enough money to build this. Now wait for enough money to get the next one and come back and collect my stuff every now and again. It is a time waster. That's what they are. They are time wasters. They do not qualify as games. Now, I'm a big believer in parental responsibility, there's no question, but it is difficult to police what your kids do on their phones. That is a very difficult thing to do. Although, why on earth would you give your kid a phone and then have your credit card tied to the App Store? That is bonkers. You can get gift cards for these kind of things. If your kid wants a game, you buy them a gift card and say, right, you have an allowance of money using this gift card. You can get apps from the App Store with this, and once you're out, then you're out. The same principle applies to Xbox Live Arcade. You do not need a credit card bound to Xbox Live Arcade or PSN. You can just give your kids a gift card and say, right, here is a points card. You get what you want with this, and once it's gone, it is gone. The whole Smurf Village was a prime example of predatory business practice from a company. There's no real question about that. Although, even in that case, it was a mistake from the parent that actually allowed this to happen. There are now more safeguards in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening. You have to, of course, put in your password every time you want to buy something. There is this grace period, which I think lasts for about 5 minutes if you're buying a bunch of stuff. But even then, that is, I suppose, something that parents need to understand. I think the problem perhaps comes down to parental ignorance when it comes to using these devices. iOS, so simple, right? Except for all of the stuff that isn't. There's actually a hell of a lot of stuff in iOS or on iPhones that is just obtuse. It's there for whatever reason. It doesn't really tell you about it, and unless you are shown it, you probably won't know that it's the case. I don't know how effective legislation against this kind of stuff is going to be, though. Yes, I think that legislating against predatory business practices aimed at kids is, quite frankly, a good thing indeed. These, quote, games are just money farms. They are cash farms. They are horrendously coded in such a way as to encourage kids to want to get hold of this stuff. Now, usually there are barriers in place, but I don't know about you. When I was a kid, I found many, many ways around that kind of stuff. Kids are pretty damn clever in that regard. Again, though, I don't know how effective the legislation would actually be. How much would it be abused? Bear in mind, there are a bunch of adults that actually play these games for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they do. And they can say, oh, well, it was my kid that did it. Oh, in Farmville or Dragon Village or indeed Smurf Village, things like an Ice Age Village and all sorts of other things that adults do actually play for whatever reason. Oh, my kid bought all this stuff, so refund me, and so on and so forth. I guess, though, that you've got to take the good with the bad. You can't just say, well, we can't legislate because someone might abuse it. That's not a good enough reason to not legislate. That happens with laws all the time. What you want to have is a system that actively discourages these kind of business practices, because quite frankly, they suck. And these games are terrible. The business practices are flat out predatory. There's no question about that. And this kind of stuff shouldn't even be in kids' games. If I had my way, any game that was deliberately marketed towards children would have no microtransactions in it whatsoever. Or you'd be able to buy a kid's version of a game. Maybe you pay more for it, and there's a special kid-friendly version that has no microtransactions and just has the same kind of gameplay. In fact, hell, I'd probably buy the kid-friendly version just because I didn't want to bother with the sodding micropayments. It's just a symptom of terrible iOS business practices, and the whole store is rife with these bloody things. In-app purchasing has indeed gone wild in many, many cases, and the vast majority of stuff on iOS is garbage as a direct result of it. Pro tip, don't get your kid an iPhone. This one comes in from Something Evil. It says, so, as you might have heard, it seems Blizz has apparently been embedding data about user accounts, server IPs, and all sorts of other useful information into user screenshots for years without users' knowledge up until someone bumped into this by accident. While this is an arguably less intrusive and more roundabout form of DRM than a need for always-on connection to the company's servers for a sodding single-player run, my question to you is, what extent can developers harvest information from consumers in such manner without informing them explicitly beyond a vague clause in the terms of service that serves little more than covering their own asses in the case of a class action lawsuit? That's kind of the point of the terms of service, right? You're supposed to cover your own ass with it. That's what it's for. Why would you have it otherwise? A roundabout form of DRM? What? What are you talking about? This is an unbelievably bizarre accusation, not to mention harvesting information from consumers. They already have the ability to harvest information from you to begin with. It is all written in the terms of service, as you accurately pointed out. The only information that is in this thing is the date and time, the realm that it's on, the account ID, and your server IP. The server IP thing serves one practical purpose, and that is to find and shut down private servers. And that's a pretty sneaky way of doing it. They've obviously been able to hide this for years without people noticing, so this is how they've been finding private servers. That's a pretty ingenious way of doing things, I've got to say. I kind of applaud them for that. This is not harvesting personal information. This information is already available to Blizzard anyway. I mean, come on. They can track all of this data in-game without any problems whatsoever. They know what account ID you have. It's on their server. They know what realm you're playing on. They are the one hosting it. Come off it. This is not a big deal, in my honest opinion. So here's the argument that's being made by people that are really worried about their privacy. It's that the account name could be used as a way to identify potential targets for phishing or brute force hack attempts. They could also be used to allow people to stalk or annoy a user by letting you link together which account has which character. So if you've got an alt and people don't know who you are, they can say, oh, that guy's actually on this account, and I can go and bother him. They could also be used to attack specific accounts that have a lot of very high-value alts on, for instance. The thing about all of this is that, I'm sorry, I played WoW for a very, very long time, and I have not heard of a single instance of someone's account being brute forced with the password. Is that even possible? I'm pretty sure that WoW does not allow you to just sit there brute forcing passwords. There comes a point where it either says no or flags it and says, oi, what the hell is actually going on here? The common methods that were used and are still used to this day to hack, quote-unquote, people's accounts are the keylogger and phishing. Phishing is by far the most common. You end up putting in your username and password into something that you thought was legit and actually wasn't. They now have your username and password and they log in and horrible things end up happening to you. The second thing being that a keylogger ends up on your machine, logs your keys, gets your username and password, logs in and done. The very notion that this would suddenly unleash a wave of hacking terror upon the WoW population is quite frankly ridiculous. Supposedly this started happening in 2007, yet we've only figured it out right now in 2012, so that's 5 years down the line. And I would think that if someone had figured it out prior to this and was actually using it to get a hold of people's accounts, then that information would have probably leaked somehow prior to that. There are much, much easier ways of getting a hold of this kind of information. And once again, this is not your password. This is your account ID, which only has very, very limited use to begin with. It's even less useful because when they converted over to Battle.net in 2009, you started to log in with your email address, not your account ID. So for the past 3 years, it's been completely bloody useless. I completely and heartily disagree with the idea that your account ID is very sensitive information, as people seem to believe. Now, you could argue that the terms of use are a bit misleading because they allow for communication of information, which includes pretty much all of that stuff. Account name, current time, date, that's all in the TOS. It doesn't say anything about embedding it in a screenshot, Well, why the hell would it? Because if they did, then private server guys would instantly figure out what they were using to track them. I mean, for the past 5 years, this has been used to shut down private servers. So obviously you want to try and keep it a secret. And the argument is that users mistakenly, and this is a quote from the article, mistakenly assume that Blizzard will use a safe channel via Battle.net, not public screenshots. This fails to protect our privacy. What privacy? What privacy? Your account name? Does that really qualify as privacy? I don't know, maybe it's because I come from the UK, which is essentially the land of surveillance cameras, but for me, privacy does not extend that far. At the end of the day, it's an account name created on the World of Warcraft server. The entire thing is Blizzard's property, essentially. They can do this if they so desire, and the worst thing that's going to end up happening is your account gets hacked, and then they have to restore it. Oh, woe is you. It's irritating, but it actually, in the grand scheme of things, is not a big deal. I do not view this as invasion of privacy. I also don't buy into the theory that this somehow made it easier over the past 5 years for people to hack World of Warcraft accounts. Again, we would have most likely heard about it prior to now if this was actually being used. Someone else would have figured it out. I, like many of you, no doubt, have received phishing attempts over the past 5 years of playing WoW, and not a single one of them has indicated this person actually has my account name. When it comes to phishing and when it comes to hacking WoW accounts, you cast a very wide net. You go on the basis that maybe 0.001% of people are silly enough to put in that information, and that's the haul that you get. I really have difficulty believing that there were criminal hacking masterminds using this information to break into people's accounts, and I think that it's a massive hoo-ha over absolutely nothing. If it was including your actual IP address, maybe we'd have a case there. Maybe that would be a problem, but it doesn't. And one last point, by the way, this whole scandal was broken by a website called Owned Core. You know what Owned Core do? They exploit video games. These guys post screenshots of the exploits, and they cut out their character name, thinking they're amazingly safe. Except up to this point, Blizzard's known all about it anyway. So aren't they feeling just a little bit stupid? Hardy bloody ha. Yeah, let's lash back at Blizzard and the big Activision Blizzard monolith, the machine, the bad guys. Come on, I'm the last person in the world to be a Blizzard apologist. You know me better than that, but this is a non-issue. Sucks to be you, private server guys. Sucks to be you, exploiting dudes. Just don't try and make me believe that you're suddenly crusading for what is right. Not in my name. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox, and I shall see you next time.